Keir Starmer's leadership has become a lightning rod for criticism, with his post-faced sanctimonious manner and conspicuous lack of charisma grating on a nation yearning for hope and dynamism in a time of crisis. The public craves leaders who can inspire while delivering results. A balanced Storer seems unable to strike. His dull, almost bureaucratic approach is a far cry from the flamboyance of Boris Johnson or the charismatic touch of Tony Blair, leaving many to question whether he possesses the personal gravitas to lead effectively. Starmer's record-breaking approval, slumped now at a dismal 38, the largest post-election drop for any UK Prime Minister, signals deeper structural issues, disillusionment with unfulfilled promises, perceived indecision on pivotal issues like immigration and the economy, and a failure to connect with Labour's heartlands have left his government on shaky ground. Approval ratings often serve as a barometer for a government's credibility, and Storer no ZV threatened through Labour's ability to enact meaningful reforms even within his own ranks. Starmer struggles to rally the troops. Deputy Leader Angelo Reyna's less than flattering comparison of him to a civil servant underscores the perception of internal disunity. These cracks in the Labour facade only amplify voter doubts, especially among working-class communities who feel overlooked and uninspired by his leadership for a party that claims to champion the ordinary Briton starer's perceived detachment risks, further alienating the very voters Labour must win back to remain viable. The UK's £7.6 billion commitment to overseas climate aid has become a lightning rod for criticism, with opponents decrying it as a tone-deaf expenditure at a time of soaring living costs, vulnerable pensioners struggling to heat their homes, and farmers grappling with crippling taxes. Critics argue that redirecting even a fraction of this funding, say $2 billion, toward domestic relief could address immediate priorities and shore up public confidence. On the other hand, advocates for climate finance emphasize the UK's moral and historical responsibility to assist nations disproportionately bearing the brunt of climate change, a burden tied to the UK's legacy as an industrial power. Pulling back on this funding could not only erode the country's standing as a global climate leader, but also weaken its influence in critical international forums, potentially damaging relationships with developing nations that rely on these commitments. For Starmer, this is as much a political tight RPP as it is a policy challenge. While cutting climate aid could score short-term points with a frustrated electorate, it risks alienating environmental groups and tarnishing Labour's progressive credential. His reluctance to make such a move has fueled criticism that his leadership is detached from domestic realities, exacerbating perceptions of inaction at a time when bold choices are needed. Balancing domestic discontent with global obligations will require Storer to deploy far more political agility than he has shown so far. UK is shaking the foundations of British politics, polling at 24, leapfrogging Labour's 23, and inching closer to 2,880. The Conservatives' 26, the party surge threatens to unseat prominent Labour figures, including Deputy Leader Angela Rear, Shadow Health Secretary West Streeting Chris Bryant, and Shabana Ahmad. If the trend holds, reform has masterfully channeled public frustration with immigration, economic pressures, and political elites, carving out of space as a serious challenger to the two-party establishment under Nigel Farage's combative and unapologetic leadership. Reform UK has captured the disillusionment of right-wing voters and working-class Labour defectors alike, with net migration at a staggering 96,000 in June. 2023 Reform's staunch anti-immigration stance has struck a chord with those who feel the main parties have lost control of Britain's borders. Economic hardship has only deepened the dissatisfaction, leaving both Labour and the Conservatives scrambling to respond convincingly. This growing unrest has opened a door for reform to position itself as the insurgent force capable of breaking traditional political dominance. Labour, meanwhile, finds itself on the back foot. Losing senior figures such as Ryar and Streeting would deal a severe blow to Keir Starmer's leadership, destabilizing Labour's ability to present itself as a credible government. In waiting, the party's failure to connect with traditional working-class voters, particularly on issues of immigration and national identity, has left it vulnerable to Reform's populist message. For the Conservatives, the rise of Reform UK is equally perilous. By siphoning off right-wing voters, Reform risks splitting the Conservative vote in marginal constituencies, potentially handing victories to Labour in unexpected places. This has forced the Tories to consider hardening their positions on immigration and sovereignty in an attempt to outflank Farage's party reform. Oak's ascent marks a seismic shift in the political landscape, driven by a growing disillusionment with traditional parties' inability to address the electorate's core concerns, Labour's internal vulnerability, and the Conservatives' fragmented voter base highlight the challenges both face in countering Reform's populist appeal with Farage at the helm. This insurgent movement could trigger a dramatic realignment in political loyalties, reshaping the contours of British politics ahead of the next general election. My lords, it is often said, and it is a cliché to say it, but hey, I'm the Archbishop. Still, if you want to make God laugh, make plans, well, on that basis. Next year, I will be causing God more hilarity than anyone else for many years, because the plans for next year were very detailed and extensive. If you pity anyone, pity my poor diary secretary, who's seen weeks and months of work disappear in a path of a resignation announcement, the reality which I wish to start with, and then pay some thanks, and then talk about housing. The reality is that there comes a time, if you are technically leading a particular institution or area of responsibility, where the shame of what has gone wrong, whether one is personally responsible or not, must require a head to roll. And there is only in this case one head that rolls well enough. I hope not literally one of my predecessors. In 1371, Simon of Sudbury had his head cut off, and it was then the peasants, the revolting peasants at the time, played football with it at the Tower of London. I don't know who won, certainly wasn't Simon of Sub. The reality is that the safeguarding and care of children and vulnerable adults in the Church of England today is thanks to thousands and tens of thousands of people across the Church, particularly in parishes. In parish, safeguarding officers is a completely different picture to the past. And however, when I look back at the last 50 or 60 years, not only through the eyes of the Making Report, however one takes one's view of personal responsibility, it is clear that I had to stand on, and it is for that reason that I do so well. I think he's missed the sort of message. Really, Peter, it didn't sound to me as if there was any contrition at all. I'm not a fan of Justin Welby. I think he is the epitome of everything that's wrong with the British establishment. Glad he was wearing his red and white Lord's lanyard, with his Lord's pass on it. But no, I think I don't know where the truth lies with what's happened in the past, but he's been there a long time. People have lost confidence in him, and the best thing he could have done was make a dignified speech, stepping down, bowing out, and doing it in a sensible way. And I don't think what he did there hits. It didn't look to me like he was contrite at all. Reform UKM Peru L's damning indictment of Justin Welby as the epitome of everything that's wrong with the British establishment captures the public mood following the Archbishop's controversial resignation. WB's departure, marred by a lack of accountability for the Church's mishandling of abuse cases, has fueled accusations that he deflected blame and cast himself as a martyr in a moment that demanded humility and Rhysien Wubb's perceived tone of self-preservation. And deflection has only deepened public mistrust in both his leadership and the institution he represented. Wubbe's ill-judged justice about a 14th-century archbishop's execution and the levity of his resignation speech have been widely criticized as tone-deaf and dismissive of the gravity of the abuse scandals that have rocked the church survivors, and advocates expressed outrage viewing his remarks as emblematic of an institution more focused on protecting itself than addressing the pain of its victims as the moral figurehead of the Church of England. Wubbe's comments have highlighted a glaring disconnect between leadership and the expectations of a disillusioned public. The backlash has not been limited to the public sphere. Senior clergy, including the Bishop of Newcastle, have openly criticized Wubbe's language, exposing internal fractures within the Church. This internal dissent underscores crisis of trust, with calls for greater accountability and reform echoing across both pews and pulpits. The Church's inability to project a unified and compassionate response risks further alienating its dwindling base of support. While Welby has since apologized for his remarks, the damage appears to have been done. His apology, perceived by many as reactive rather than genuine, has done little to quell the outrage or address systemic concerns for an institution grappling with its credibility. Wubbe's exit serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of tone-deaf leadership in moments of profound institutional reckoning. Thanks for watching. Be sure to join our free Telegram group, linked in the description, where we can discuss important issues freely and without censorship and